What's going on, everyone? My name is Machine Gun Hunt and welcome to another Destiny 2 video. I'd like to say to everyone Merry Christmas, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, then any other holiday you celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful time. But today I'm going to start off a series about my most favorite builds that I like to show you. So I'm going to give myself a couple of rules. I'm going to give myself only 4 builds for each video. One of them is going to be based on each subclass that I use for each class, and there's going to be 3 videos in total talking about the 4 subclasses of each class. So for this one, we're starting off with my favorite class, the Warlock, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start off with the Voidwalker. Alright then, so the first build what we have here is the everyday build, using the Voidwalker and really any sort of gun, but I personally like using Gjallarhorn the most because it's really good for boss damage, also for ad clearing. And then for any other weapon, I personally like to use the Night Watch as well as the Salvager's Salvo for specific reasons later on, just really good. And then we'll have the exotic Conversive Hold. Then we also want to have some average stats, so 60 resilience, 60 recovery, 83 discipline, as well as 70 intellect, because we want to spam as much grenades as possible, as well as getting rewarded from those grenades as well. So altogether, we have extra grenade energy mods as well as like one recovery mod. We can increase this a little bit more if you want to do like more intellect if we wanted to, but I personally prefer more recovery for warlocks anyway. Some rocket launcher ammo finder, as well as ashes to assets. We are spamming our grenade as much as possible, so we can go ahead and take advantage of gaining that super energy. Plus, since we have Conversive Hold, we do more damage, and plus the grenade lasts a lot longer. Plus, we get our grenade back, that's able to get more super energy in the process, so you know how the deal works. So then every time we throw a grenade, we have 2 grenade kickstarts right here. Every time we expand a grenade, we get more grenade energy, so we don't have to worry about wasting grenades. Then, of course, rocket launcher reserves, so we can, if we wanted to, we can have like 1 grenade launcher reserve, but 2 is just better because you have 9 rockets with Gjallarhorn. Then for the boots, we have recuperation, always good for survivability. We also have bomber. Every time we use our class ability, we get more grenades, so we're basically complete with like getting as much grenade energy as possible. Then we have is taking charge, protective light, that sort of basic crap, as well as well of ordnance. Every time we pick up a solar well, grants you additional grenade energy, as well as explosive well maker. Now, since we have Gjallarhorn, Salvager's Salvo, as well as Night Watch with explosive payload, basically any kills that we have that's left over from the explosions, we will get those solar ordnance mods, so that we're able to go ahead and get some more energy for collecting wells to get more grenade energy. So basically spamming as much grenades as possible, using your weapons to get explosive, and use your grenades as possible, as well as using your Nova Bomb to clear things out with some moderate survivability. I personally love this build because you could just do a whole bunch of things with it without dealing with much thought. If you want to go ahead and take advantage with the wells, just go ahead and shoot enemies and pick them up. As simple as that. If you want to use your grenade, you can go ahead and use your grenade, no problem. If you want to use your super, use your super. If you want to use your grenade launcher, use your grenade launcher. It really, it basically is so easy to do this build that it's not even funny. The purpose of this build is so that I could do what I want to do without giving much thought. I do love Destiny builds from several YouTubers. However, I feel that a lot of times there's loads of things I need to think about when I'm doing a certain type of build. However, with this build, I just absolutely love this because I can simply just play the game regularly, basically as super powerful as I want to be, without worrying about any type of champion mods, any sort of like guns that's to switch the certain types of modes. So I could do maximum DPS, like Iganagi's Burden, Agar's Scepter, some of the sidearms that's used so you can get more ability cooldowns. No, I just want to shoot my gun, use my super and use my grenade at the right time so I can go ahead and kill the enemies as quickly as possible so I could do the activity. This is the build for simple gameplay. And I personally think it's one of the best ones out there simply because it's so simple even a 10-year-old could or 5-year-old could use it. Say, oh, what should I do? Oh, use your Gallahorn. Okay. Use your guns. Use your super. All that. Okay. It's so easy. It's not even funny. I should call it the not funny build because it's so easy to play with this build. I love it. I do it. I use this build every single day playing PvE. It's just really good. It's even good for raids. It's good for nightfalls. It's good for pretty much anything except for like high-end activities such as grandmasters or master raids. It's really good. I recommend you check it out. And yeah, there you go. Alright then, so next build we have is endgame Well of Radiance. Obviously we're using Well of Radiance, of course, as well as using any weapon that we want. I'm personally using 1,000 Voices because, obviously it does the most damage compared to other weapons. If we're using, Sleeper Simulant, then you could do that as well because it got buffed recently. You could basically use any weapon like Air Blast that you could use. This is really made for end game activities such as nightfalls and master raids. And depending on what kind of champions you're going against, it's pretty obvious that we're going to have to switch weapons around. Like I'm pretty sure this week you're going to have unstoppable champions. So you want to do is probably go ahead and equip unstoppable mod for your arm slots. So yeah, that's the weapons right here. It really doesn't matter, but this was what was used last week. So this was the most viable option. So what we have here is Phoenix Protocol. What we could do is we could either use Phoenix Protocol or Lunafaction Boost depending on what situation we have. In a raid, I'll probably want to use Lunafaction Boost, but for a Nightfall, I do like using Phoenix Protocol more because I could go ahead and spam my super more often. And then of course we do have Intellect at 100. There's lots of new changes with getting super energy, including recovery or really getting back your super. What numbers and different types of tiers that's used. If I remember correctly, Well of Radiance is the fastest super recharge that we have in the game right now. And so if we want to take advantage on getting our Well of Radiance as quickly as possible, 100 Intellect is the way to go. Now there is discussion on whether we should run 100 Intellect or not. For PvP, I would say no because reasons. We can get super energy more than one way. It's like, back then it was for like abilities. It was for using like weapons such as using Thresh, using Bad Juju, using abilities or mods such as Ashes to Assets to go ahead and get more super energy. Now we can get like a whole bunch of different ways of getting super energy. Getting damaged, shooting enemies, killing enemies, etc. And for this build, we actually want to focus on damaging enemies so we can get more super energy. And I seem to notice that fusion rifles actually work really well on gaining super energy because it's made to do as much damage and DPS as possible so we can regain our super energy back as quickly as possible, especially for boss fights. So this is like double whammy. And this build not only helps for getting super energy for killing ads, but it also is good for going against bosses. So it's really good, especially if 100 intellect. And I personally think it's really good to run extremely high intellect for PvP only, not for PvP. So that's basically the armor. We do want to have extra recovery because we want to use our rift to go ahead and not only stay alive, but also help out your guardians so that they could heal as well. Not only that, you could recharge your ability as well because of the Well of Radiance. For now we have Fusion Rifle Ammo Finder as well as champion mods, so we can go ahead and take them out. Now for this right here, we're not using any reserve mods. We're having defensive mods such as Sniper Damage Resist, Consumptive Dampener. If we're lucky, we have Void resistance damage, Arc resistance damage, depending on what we have available. So if we're using Lunafaction Boots, this will probably be a lot more flexible. However, using Phoenix Protocol, we only have Void, which is not the best, but I kind of wish we could choose our damage types depending on if we upgrade them or not. And then, Fusion Scavenger, recuperation for that extra survivability. We do have Focusing Lens as well as Particle Deconstruction with 1,000 Voices. Now, Focusing Lens doesn't work for everyone else except for a Well of Radiance Warlocks. What used to be the case is we could use our guns for damage if we're going against, if you basically get increased damage with your guns while standing on a well. And if you were a guardian just standing on it, if you have Focusing Lens, you could do that too. However, that only works for the Warlock Well of Radiance. However, this mod is still viable because you could use this for bonus damage, including you could use Shoulder Charge for Peregrine Greaves. You could use Thunder Crash with Starlight, of course, and then, of course, Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun. You could still get extra damage using those abilities. And then, of course, we have Shield Break Charge, as well as Taking Charge for getting charged with Light, as well as using Protective Light so we can increase our survivability. And then we have Fire and Ice just to round out the build for getting extra ability charge. So yeah, basically this build is made to go ahead and use your Well of Radiance as much as possible, with also a few extra bonuses to go ahead and use them for endgame activities. Of course, extra damage resistances depending on what kind of enemies you're going against, some mods going against champions, going ahead and using certain weapons for most DPS, and then of course, taking advantage of what currently the meta is happening right now. I do want to plan out my mods as well as my builds for the future, even though there's like a new meta. I want to make it so that my builds right now are viable. As you can see from the previous build, it doesn't even have fusion rifles at all with no particle deconstruction, simply because I want to make it so that it's useful later in the future. Even though particle deconstruction is disappearing, I really need to put this on silent. I'm keeping this in the video, by the way. It's a life lesson for me every time I watch this video. What you want to do is, even though particle deconstruction is not going to be available later on, it's still going to be viable simply because of the new mechanic that came out with gaining super energy. And that is simply inflicting damage to somebody. When you're inflicting damage to a big boss with loads of HP, and you're using 1,000 voices to do as much damage as possible, guess what? Now you can gain super energy on hits. This is actually not only really good for going against bosses in, the freaking Nightfall, the freaking Raid. It's even good on Gambit. If you want to spam your super as much as possible, just do damage on the boss and you can spam your supers. This is probably going to be really good for going against, like, Primevals, going against a whole bunch of enemies, using Taken Spec, and then a Fusion Rifle, going against a freaking, Primeval. Then you can get your super energy as quickly as possible and keep spamming Thunder Crash on the mother ducker. So, I am planning to show that a little bit in a future video, but I think this is going to be such a big problem for Gambit that Bungie might even have to nerf it. That's how serious I think it is. There's lots of cool things that you could do. I love the new meta because you could take advantage on several ways to get super energy because there's so many new ways of gaining super energy. There's certain builds just, taking damage in PvP, and you could use more supers in PvP. And I personally think Bungie hadn't thought this through because with Titan, I feel it's going to be ridiculous, especially using Behemoth Titan. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some great viability options, and, make sure you keep an eye on for this stuff. And this build is just made to take advantage of that new change, and I cannot wait to use this later on in future seasons, especially for the Witch Queen. Alright then, so next build right here is Freeze the World. We're taking advantage of Agar's Scepter as well as some different mods that takes place with the Warlock Stasis subclass. So what we have here, Winter's Wrath, Healing Rift, Burst Glide, we have Phantasmal Burst, Glacier Grenade, as well as Glacial Harvest, which is very important. We do have Bleak Walker, which is deterrent. Whisper of Chains, that increases our recovery. as well as going ahead and every time we stay next to stasis crystals, we have resistance to damage, which is pretty good. We also have, using stasis to just, we get more damage from our stasis for taking out our glaciers. We also have nearby stasis shards that it actually comes back to us. It gives us a plus 10 to intellect as well as resilience, which is good for survivability. And then when we shatter stasis crystals, we temporarily get boosts in grenade recharge rate. So what this build is made to do, it go ahead and makes us get as much shards and as much glaciers as possible, so we can spam our grenades, so we can go ahead and regain our abilities as quickly as possible. So what's probably good is you want to have high discipline as well as high intellect. Now, unfortunately, I do not have this optimized, but I recommend you go ahead and use Destiny 2 Armor Picker, so you can go ahead and optimize it the way that you want. But depending on whether you want to use this for endgame activities, especially during the raids, you can do that. I recommend that you want to have at least 70 discipline as well as 70 intellect with this build. But for now, we do have 100 intellect, 100 recovery and 100 discipline with this build, simply because this is actually left over from a previous build I've made, which is a stasis turret build. So, Agar Scepter, we do want to use this exotic right here. It is the Mantle of Battle Harmony. What this does, it not only gives us extra super energy for stasis kills, which guess what, we're using Agar Scepter, but then once your super is full, you can go ahead and get increased damage towards your weapons if you kill an enemy with the same ability. So let's say my super is full, I use Agar Scepter to kill an enemy. That means I activate Mantle of Battle Harmony, is ability, and I can go ahead and do more damage with this chest piece, so my Agar Scepter does more damage. And not only that, we do have some mods that increases the stacks. So as you can see, we have several discipline mods, so we can get to 100 discipline for spamming as much glaciers as possible. Of course, we do have Trace Rifle Finder because we want to use the Agar Scepter as much as possible. We do have grenade kickstarts. Every time we throw our grenade, we bring back our grenade back as quickly as possible. We do have Trace Rifle reserves to carry more ammo for Agar Scepter. We do have Fusion Rifle Scavenger for some reason. I am using it for this little Reed's Regret right here, just to keep up DPS in case for for bosses. And then we also have Particle Deconstruction for Reed's Regret, as well as Fire and Ice. This is good for going against champions if we wanted to. And then fortunately for Agar Scepter, we can actually go against champions without having that much mods equipped. So if we do want to, we could use Anti-Barrier with Gnawing Hunger right here. We could just get rid of one of these grenade kickstarts right here. And then finally right here, this is what makes the build right here. We have Font of Might, which every time we pick up an elemental well, we can go ahead and increase our damage using Agar Scepter. So it goes double whammy with Battle Harmony as well as this mod right here. So we can do even more damage with Agar Scepter, which is ridiculous. Elemental Shard, which makes this build. Every time we pick up a shard, this counts as an elemental well. So every time we pick it up, we can go ahead and activate Font of Might as much as possible. Basically, you don't have to run out of wells, which is really good. We don't have to worry about that stuff. All the stasis abilities we're doing is spawning shards, which is really good. Then we have Elemental Time Desolation. This makes it so that it grants you more time depending on what abilities you use. This is made for Font of Might, so instead of having 10 seconds, we have 12 seconds. So it basically gives us more time to do more damage, and we can go ahead and keep doing that damage against the enemy, so we can keep spawning those shards, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we have Well of Restoration. Picking up a Stasis Elemental Well grants you additional energy for your abilities that have the lowest energy. So if you don't have much grenade energy, you can pick up those shards and you can go ahead and get your grenade back, and you can keep spamming it as much as possible. So basically, do as much damage as possible with your abilities. casting stasis, getting as much shards. Pick up the shards, use Agar Scepter to do as much damage as possible. Not only that, if you unlock the Catalyst, then you can go ahead and use pretty good boss DPS as well as champions DPS as well. Very effective for everyday play, and I love using this for stuff like Dares of Eternity. Wow, it's Warlock that wants to do lots of stasis. I know, it sounds pretty, obvious, but what's cool about this build is that it has loads of opportunities to take advantage of Agar Scepter. Especially for those who want to take advantage of, the stasis turret. This is actually a pretty good option, basically as a secondary to use, and then use the Agar Scepter as your primary. Obviously, this build is revolved around Agar Scepter, making Agar Scepter better, stronger, more powerful, taking advantage of the after effect of using Agar Scepter, so you can increase your ability spam, so you can use even more Agar Scepter. That's all what this build is. It takes advantage of one particular weapon and taking it to its maximum. Now, my personal opinion, the Warlock does take advantage of Agar Scepter the most. However, I have seen some good builds from Hunter, and I honestly think maybe Titans would take advantage of this with the new Behemoth changes. But the biggest thing about this build is that it makes it so that it's easier to use a specialized build that's made for all sorts of different content. What I've noticed with lots of builds in the YouTube, in Facebook and Twitter or whatever you can find builds from Destiny, is that it never applies to other sorts of different activities. Is this build good in Gambit? Is this build good in strikes? Is this build good for raids, nightfalls, dungeons, all sorts of things? My personal opinion, and I have used this build for a whole bunch of different types of activities, yes, this build is amazing with all activities, especially Vault of Glass with Templar and with Ghost, before Templar and with Gatekeepers. It is awesome against ads, and honestly, there's very rare exceptions where Destiny actually nerfs things because of it's really powerful in PvE. With Agar Scepter, it's probably going to be an issue later on with Witch Queen if it keeps up like this, because it's just so easy to clear ads with this weapon that it kind of makes it so that other guardians around you can't kill their enemies, which is, probably good. They could focus on maybe boss damage. They could focus on doing all the mechanics for a raid. They could focus on other activities and all that. But if you're a guy in the raid that is made to do ad clear and not the mechanics, then this is the build for you for a Warlock. Highly recommend. You should go ahead and use it pretty much every single day, including with very hard activities. Alright then, last build right here. So what we have here is what I personally call Goku. Don't mind me, I'm just a Dragon Ball nut. So it's pretty simple. We do have the military Stormcaller to go ahead and take advantage of the super. We are running 100 intellect as well as 100 discipline, not only for survivability, but we could use our rift just to keep us alive. We do have all sorts of different weapons, to be honest with you. What I like to do is I like to run this build playing Deep Stone Crypt right here. This is actually a good build to run. Not only is good against captains, but you can also go ahead and switch up weapons as much as you want. You probably noticed I do have an overload bow mod here. I like to run bow with this build. Maybe use this right here, and then I can use any weapon I want over here. Maybe Salvager Salvo, any sort of. But this is how it's set up right here. I do like using different types of weapons with this build. Then obviously what we have here is Lament. I guess you could say this is more of a Trunks build, but whatever. Basically, this build is made to go ahead and consistently help you with your abilities. You have certain abilities that makes it so that you want to survive, as well as have offense. So it's very defensive and very offensive. So that's basically how the build works out for the character right here, at least in my mind. So we do have Lament. This makes it so that we do as much damage as possible. We do have the Geomag Stabilizer, so we could do more damage with our super. And then what's cool about this super is every time we kill enemies, so we basically get back some ability because of the seekers that come towards you. So you could basically not worry about discipline or strength. However, I do have them at pretty mid tier, honestly. I could probably reduce that and give you more resilience, but you know, 5 resilience, 5 or 6 is all you need for endgame activities. And then we have all the abilities right here. Basically anything that makes it so they give you increased recovery as well as intellect. We do have hands on. This is because our melee attack is actually distant, so we can actually kill plenty of enemies using this. So we can get more energy based on super energy right here. We do have extra sword ammo finder, so we can get some more lament. We do have an overload bow simply because of deep stone crypt. We do have sword reserves for our laments. We also get Sword Salvager, so again, I guess you could say this is a Trunks build, as well as some different sort of, recovery options, picking up orbs so we can stay alive. And then we have Focusing Lens, simply because of DPS for those enemies, depending on if there's stasis going on with them. So that's pretty optimal there for as much damage as possible with this super. Then, of course, we have Taking Charge for picking up orbs, so we get more Charge of Light. We do have Radiant Light, specifically because of Loosened Blade. Now, because of Loosened Blade does more damage depending on how much attacks you do, this works best with Lament, as well as using Radiant Light, because a secondary perk on Loosened Blade is that you get more charge rate much faster, so you can go ahead and do the final attack, the chain slices as quickly as possible. So these two perks right here, absolutely crazy with each other, plus you get more super energy with melee, so that's why I have this right here. And then finally, I do have Supercharge, so I can get a maximum additional 2 stacks, which I can get 4. And then for extra protective light, I can go ahead and keep this up for extra survivability. So this is good because if I want to use Loosened Blade, I can whenever I want when I'm using this sword. But when I'm not using this sword, I can use protective light so I can keep up surviving. Very weird build, but it's my personal favorites simply because I love using Lament during Deep Stone Crypt, plus for some extra activities. And then I love using my super to take on as much enemies as possible so I can help out my teammates so they can get charged with light. All that stuff is really fun build, and there's extra flexibility with this build because I can switch these 2 weapons as much as possible. Sniper, shotgun, pulse rifle, hand cannon, grenade launcher, anything that you could think of. I personally love this build a lot. One of my absolute favorites. Alright guys, honestly I have no idea why this build works. The only thing I could think of is how Lament as a sword, like how its mechanics work. Now, a lot of you probably don't know is that Lament has one of the highest guard stats out of any sword. Plus, it could heal you. So you can not only use Lament as a offensive weapon because it does the most damage, but you could also use it as a defensive weapon as well. You can just simply guard and get damage resistance from most attacks. And not only that, you can go ahead and attack enemies so you could heal, so you could survive a lot longer. If you put in protective light as well as recuperation with your boots, then you can make it so that you are the survivor. And this is why I like to call it the Goku build, because it not only has plenty of offense, but as defense as well. Now, this is probably one of the few exceptions where I recommend that Warlocks actually go ahead and have some more mobility. And if you're not really big into using Geomag Stabilizers for your super, then you can go ahead and use transverse steps so you can have more mobility. So you can go ahead and understand this. For some odd reason, I think it's because of the Lament. It's not only good offensively, it's also good defensively. It's good for loads of activities such as dungeons, such as Dares of Eternity, such as a whole bunch of different activities, like any 6-man activity that's available. And for some reason, it's good in raids. I do not know why. Every time I do Vault of Glass or Deep Stone Crypt, it just works very well. I know Lament is more made for Deep Stone Crypt, but for some odd reason, any encounter with loads of ads, Lament just works super well. Not only that, you also could go ahead and take advantage of, the Warlock's ability to regain more ability cooldown every time you kill an enemy. So you could go ahead and get more super energy, more grenade energy, all that stuff. So you can go ahead and, use your abilities to go ahead and do well. What I personally like to do is, if I'm going against a tough enemy, Rift, Lament. Simple as that. And you can cool down your abilities pretty well using this build. Plus, Kamehameha sounds pretty cool to me. That is it for the video, guys. That is my 4 builds that I love using the most in this game with the Warlock. Next year, yes, you did hear that right. Next year, I am going to start off with Hunter and show you my 4 favorite builds with Destiny 2 with the Hunter. There's gonna be no videos, no live streams whatsoever at 2021 anymore. However, in 2022, I am going to be continuing on with this series, and I am going to make some pretty big videos outside of Destiny. There's some things, it does connect to Destiny, but I do want to talk about them. It's actually pretty important. It's just I got to do a lot of research and reading and, all that stuff. So stay tuned for that. That's going to come out in 2022. You guys, I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas or any other holiday that you guys celebrate. I hope you have a great time. Just make sure you go ahead and just hang out with your family. Go ahead and, if you're off of work, play like that video game they haven't played for the longest time. Go ahead and do some extra stuff. Have some ham on me. Hope you guys have a great time. I'll see you in 2022. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you guys. God bless. I'll see you next time. And remember, be excellent to each other. Alright guys, good night.